In this episode of the Refinery Podcast, I'm talking with Dr. Alicia and Burt Villarreal, and they are the co-authors of The Art of Professional Prospecting. It's been my privilege to work with them and take this book, turn it into an online program. Listen, if you are in sales, you cannot miss this episode, and you cannot miss being great at prospecting. So let's get into it. All right. Well, here we are in the studio after all these months of preparation and time online together, and lots of meetings, lots of conversations for an incredible project, which we're going to get into. But Dr. Alicia and Burt, welcome to the Refinery Studio.
It's great to be here.
I am so glad that both of you are here. And we're prepping for a week of recording here, and we're gonna talk about what that's all about.
Yep.
But thank you for making the trip here from San Antonio to be in the studio. And so let's do this. I know that there will be people that are watching this who have met you and had the pleasure of spending time with the two of you, and some who haven't. But your company is BAABCO Leadership Consulting. And so what I'd love to do is just start with, can you give me like the background? What was the genesis of your company? How did BAABCO Leadership Consulting get started?
I'll turn it over to the doctor.
All right. We'll start with you.
Well, it started, it was really just an organic way of starting the company. It started with me being getting my degree in interdisciplinary learning and teaching.
Okay.
About 17 years ago. And we got a call from our county asking us to develop some of their leaders. And so at the time I was working for a local school district.
Okay.
And so we were doing it while I had a full-time job, you had a full-time job. And so in between that, we were really working with the county as well. And so as the need grew, we started to just realize that it was not possible to continue doing that. So I decided to leave my position at the district and become a consultant.
Okay.
And the district asked me, well, we need you. So can you be a consultant for us as well? So it ended up working that way, that I was able to really become a consultant for the county and as well as for the district. And so it just continue to just grow and grow and grow.
They got to keep their relationship with you and benefit from
so they
your
pretty much put me in business. So yes.
That's great. And so that was, so you kind of shifted out of that actual profession and then into a consultant for that. What about you prior to that? What was your background prior to?
Right. So it started in the leadership development space, right?
Okay.
And so the call that we got was from somebody that I knew from the technology space, right? Who had moved in a leadership position for the county in the technology-driven part of his role at the county. And so I come from a heavy background of technology sales early in my career. And then I spent the last really 30 years in funding technology. I worked for a global player, private player, global player in the funding space. And I funded massive accounts in municipalities, in the aerospace sectors, right?
Sure.
And of course, the down the street business as well too. So during that time, I started writing content, specifically around the importance of discipline in prospecting, and that's what really got it started for us. In terms of developing content around that and developing relevant content that kind of became my calling card in differentiating myself among my competitors. Because I could go into our client space and offer training that my competitors weren't doing. That were funding transactions, right? Banks, but they weren't in there training the salespeople. Right. So that's what gave us the combination of being in two very relevant spaces of leadership development and sales training and development. And so then I left the financial space, right? About going on 5 years now. And joined Alicia And we knew that was going to be a game changer because once I joined her full time, then we knew the business would grow because I'm tasked with finding our next client.
Right. You got to put all your skills to work for
which I have some good experience at, right? And so I'm tasked with certain roles, around that. And that's what brings us to where we are today.
Excellent. So we're going to talk a lot about the prospecting realm of that, and of course, the project that we're working on, especially right now. Very excited about that. In the leadership realm, because leadership is one of those words that it can have a lot of different connotations, and it can mean many different things, of course. As far as leadership training, talk about some of the things that you guys encounter and offer, and what are some of the solutions that you provide in terms of leadership training, because I know it's there's some breadth to it and depth to it for sure. So just share a little bit about what you're doing in that realm.
So our focus with leadership is we really work a lot with middle leadership and C-level leadership, and what we do is we've realized that a lot of times they have been promoted to a leadership position because they have been great individual contributors, but have not really received leadership development.
Makes sense.
So we have been brought in to many companies to look at where are they right now currently in their leadership, what are their leadership skill set, and then how do we meet them where they're at and develop them and help them grow within their people skill set.
Sure.
How do we help them grow on valuing and honoring those that they lead and help them stretch and grow the people that they have been tasked to grow and lead?
Yeah.
So really, it's not the managerial part of leadership. It's the people skill set of growing people.
It's the other side of the brain.
Yes. How do you really motivate and help people become disciplined in areas that maybe they haven't considered being disciplined in? How do you stretch people to want to grow? How do you help them develop some disciplined habits?
Sure.
Of not wanting to coast and do minimal work, but really want to be part of the vision of the enterprise.
Yeah, and the reason why you do that is because those are the things that make the real results, right? That's in other words, what I'm aware of is that up until really recent history, anything that would have been called leadership training really was more management training. And it was like, hey, if you follow these processes exactly, that's what they were calling leadership. But you're talking about the nuanced parts and the emotional intelligent parts and the and what it takes to really work, not just what is our process, but how are we going to do this together? Yeah.
So, and the 4 disciplines of execution, which Covey is one of the authors of, he talks about there's 3 levels of employees in an organization. You have your models, those that will go above and beyond and do anything to elevate the work that needs to be done. But then you also have your not yets, those that have not, that will seem like they're adopting anything that's new, but will do the bare minimum to just do what needs to get done. And then you have the nevers that will never, adopt to anything that's new.
Sure.
And so they will never do anything that will disrupt the way they've been doing what they need to do. So when an organization doesn't move the results, or they have results that are up and down, it's because that organization has more not yets and nevers within the organization than they have models, right? So for a leader who has maybe too many not yets or nevers in their team, they have to become very savvy in understanding what is keeping them in the nevers or not yets.
Yes.
And how do I move the needle? How do I engage with them in productive ways that can move them to become a model? How do I really engage with this group of people in my team and really develop them in a way that they want to.
Because ultimately they have to decide for themselves, right? Yeah.
But I have to do it in productive and authentic ways where they want to be part of a bigger part of the organization willingly.
Right.
Yeah.
Willingly.
Yeah. They're always, we can never bring another person's will to the equation, can we? And so there's a lot of that we do to influence.
Yeah.
But there's always something, what is keeping them in the not yets or the never, it's usually something small. And if we take the time to figure out what it is, then we can really move the needle in very profound ways.
I love that. That's very good. And so the work that you're doing in that realm, is that primarily individualistic or with teams, a combination of both? So how does that play out when you're working with the company?
It's a combination of both. So part of what we do when we engage with the companies is that I know from my research and education that one and done professional development sessions they don't work. You don't see sustainable change. Yeah. So the organizations we work with, we really do engage with them year after year after year. So what we do is we do monthly masterminds with the peers.
Okay.
So part of it is we present those big ideas. For example, execution can be a big idea. And so we present the idea, but there's a lot of collaboration with these leaders where they're maybe talking more about the challenges of execution. What is the big challenge? What is really working with one team that is not working with another team, and why? So once we present those big ideas in the monthly masterminds, then we have one-on-one coaching sessions. So then we talk about their individual challenge. There's a little bit of an assignment, like maybe 2 or 3 questions that we give them as a reflective assignment, where we really talk about their applicability, right? How they're applying it. What are the challenges they're having? What are their big what is really working for them, but what is not working, and then how do we step in and help them within those spaces in their individual team, and that's where we're able to step in. We also are able to do meeting observations to see them in the practice. What is it when we're working with, let's say, for example, execution, what may be a barrier to their execution? Are there maybe no timelines when they're in their meeting? Are there maybe not, are there perhaps when they're doing the execution, are there perhaps the expectations not being set, accordingly? So that's when we are able to step in and just maybe support that leader in some of those areas that they may be needing a little bit more support.
It sounds like there's a tremendous amount of discovery in this process, and because you're not going and saying, "Hey, let me show up and do a lunch and learn training, and everything's going to be great." This is a highly detailed, very involved, and I could only imagine that they come to see you as a very valuable member of their team, right? I mean, there is definitely a partnership element to this, correct?
Yes, and that is when we're able to triangulate the data, right? Especially when we're meeting with a senior leader, with this C-level executive, we're able to say, this is our observational data, and we can triangulate the data by being able to say, our data points are X, Y, and Z, and we're able to come up with, this is what we're seeing, the growth areas for this particular leader.
Sure. Yeah.
And so we're able to just bring a lot of information and data to be able to say these are the growth areas for this leader, but these are also the strong leadership areas for this particular leader as well. And we can leverage these areas of strength for this leader to help them grow in these areas of growth.
So there's a lot of methodology in this, and I think also you haven't said this part exactly, but I'm just aware that in this whole process, one of the parts of the methodology that you specifically provide is some specific content development and creation that would help address some of these things, correct?
Right. Yeah. So part of what we do is we do look I do create the content. We do look at a lot of thought leaders. We right now we're looking at the 4 disciplines of execution is one of the ones that we're working with. But we work with a lot with Maxwell and Covey, and a lot of the content we also create ourselves. So it depends on the need of our client and what their particular challenge may be.
Sure.
That we are able to create the content around that particular need based on what we're seeing, the trends that we're seeing on the needs, not just of, like right now we're working with a particular client that has about 91 leaders that we're working with. So when we look at the trends, we start seeing those trends and start suggesting areas for us to be able to step in and say, okay, these are the particular trends that we're seeing. And then we start even categorizing and saying, okay, so with these particular leaders, I think we should focus on this area, on this particular, with these particular leaders, maybe we need to focus more on building their influence.
Yes.
With these leaders, maybe we can focus on execution. With this particular leaders, maybe we can focus on,
executive presence.
Executive presence. So it just varies based on the trends that we see within their leadership skill set and their leadership needs.
So I can see that there's very specific focus in different areas. One thing I'm really curious about is if we think about the results and the effects of all of this. So let's say that I'm an exec and I'm either that person who's been promoted or I'm maybe the person above them. Talk about the real difference, because I know, of course, there's going to be some financial differences. What are some of the cultural, interpersonal, personal differences when people are able to engage with you in these processes? How does the game change for them?
Well, part of what the conversation we have with them is that it should shift your leadership. But most importantly, it should shift you. Because it should shift your paradigm.
Yeah.
It should shift the way you walk in this world. You should be able to see the world differently. Because what we're doing is we're helping you value people. And so that should shift you completely. It should better your life. It should better your relationships at home. It should shift everything about how you live your life, because you're seeing the value that you're bringing people. It's not just about them getting the next promotion, because if it is, it's not shifting your paradigm.
Right.
And so part of it is helping them see that shift. This is not about the promotion. This is about you understanding the value that being in leadership is you adding value to people. And that has to shift.
Absolutely.
And when they do that, it should shift them as a person.
Well, I like this idea, and we were talking about thought leaders, and certainly the thought leader that we are collectively associated with is Paul Martinelli, of course, and I've often heard him say there's no private good. There's no way that you can advance in one area of your life and not advance in others. And you're talking about a life-wide advancement as people dig into growth. And that is the value of growth, right?
Yeah. There is a part, though, that I want to address on this, okay? Part of what we do is prepare for the next step. The organizations that we work with, one in particular, is very intentional about succession planning, very intentional.
Oh, yeah.
Very intentional. And we are asked to be a part of that. One of the reasons we are there is to prepare that leader for what is next. It is not uncommon for us to ask that leader, what's next for you in the next 2 or 3 years? Are you going to be there another decade? What does that look like, right? And, a part of some of the exercises we do is we look at their strengths, we look at their words of desired growth, not their weaknesses, their words of desired growth, right? And if a leader says to me, I want to work on execution, right, which is a big topic for us the last 18 months, as you know, right? And they waver from execution, and we're working with them on execution. And they're at a level right now where maybe execution is important, right? But it's not the game changer. if we put that leader in a discussion today about in 18 months, when that next position, the next opportunity comes up to be seated as the vice president, if that happens tomorrow and your execution is not where it is today, would it be proper to be a vice president? Would you accelerate walking into that position tomorrow? And the answer is no. And what does that tell you?
Interesting.
And that's where our role as preparing them becomes important, because when their leader asks us, how is he or she doing in execution, we have to have an answer for that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So what Alicia says is so true about the skill of leadership and developing people and motivating people and driving momentum. And, to motivate people is to get them to do what you want them to do, but to get them to want to do it too.
Yeah.
However, sometimes as coaches, we have to also paint the picture of what if it happens tomorrow and you're one of 5 candidates.
Right. Yeah.
And that position has to be prepared to execute the moment you get seated in that position.
Yeah.
That is also a role that we play.
Excellent. Yeah. You're helping them to have a perspective that they're not seeing.
And most of the time, the leaders are having challenges. They're challenged with being, they have a challenge with executing, right? So how do I execute? Well, we have to help them understand and unpack that.
Sure.
Because if you can't execute, then how do you expect your team to execute? And to execute precisely and to execute consistently?
Yeah, and I suppose when you line out those 4 levels of execution, no one probably wants to point out and go, well, I'm at the lowest level or I'm at the resistant level,
right,
because they might not be aware of how much they are resisting and what's going on there. And I can see why these conversations and this awareness is so valuable. And especially then when you amp up the urgency and help them to understand, because, it is a fact of life that we are 80% more likely to move away from pain. If on the 100%, 20% will go towards pleasure and 80% will go away from pain. But if we're not feeling the pain, if it's not imminent, then, we're going to stick where we are, even if we can see that the pleasure is out there waiting on us. And sometimes I think the right thinking partner can come in and help us understand we may be closer to the pain than we realize, right?
Yeah. And it takes a BAABCO leadership development to bring in different coaching methods. And there's no doubt that Alicia and I have different coaching approaches, no doubt about it. From my sales background, I'm in the moment right now. What are you doing this afternoon about it, right?
Yeah.
And I'm going to check with you tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's my style, right?
Yeah.
The doctor's approach is much more methodical, right?
Yeah.
Much more holding you accountable, right? We're definitely a difference. And I tell you that our clients definitely appreciate it.
Yeah.
No doubt about it, especially when we present together.
Well, So how about that? Let's just talk about that a little bit. I certainly work with a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds and a lot of different industries. And I have people flat tell me, I have people that I work with that are couples that are in the same business, and they're figuring it out. They're doing a great job. And sometimes it's easy and sometimes it's pretty hard. And others who will be like, there is no way we would never work together. So obviously it's working out. How about talk to that a little bit? There's probably people that might be listening and going, I wonder if I could work with my spouse in a company. Yeah.
So I think we're very fortunate. We're not a firm that has many clients. We are very fortunate to have great clients. In multiple spaces, and Alicia definitely is the content creator. She definitely does the heavy lifting, right? What she's been able to do with the art of professional prospecting in terms of putting it, in presentation form.
And it's outstanding.
Creating the mastermind around the artificial the artificial prospecting around the mastermind for it, right? For a global client, has been incredible, right? And for, privately owned companies as well, too. When we present together, we just get very high marks when we're presenting either live, especially live, right? Because our approach is different. If we get zeroed in on a sales representative in a group of his or her peers, and we're talking about certain strategy, whether it's around intelligence gathering, whether it's around overcoming objections, whether it's around, the 11 steps of the sales process and where are you at this given moment? Why don't you know what your next step is? Well, let's put it into components, right? We like to entertain as well too, and so educational and entertainment, right? And we often get really just good comments from owners or executives, of companies saying that they really like our approach. But it's a natural fit. It's not anything that we rehearse.
Sure.
I think it's just because of our different styles, right? They see her as the intellectual, right? The doctor, right? When she does this, they do this. They shut up. I'm the sales guy, and I'm very comfortable in that space, right? And it's hard to pull one over me, right? Because I've led teams before as well too. So it's just a nice mix.
Nice.
Wouldn't you agree?
What do you think? You got to verify it. Make sure.
Yeah.
Very good. Yeah. Well, that's it, and it's fun, and it's been a pleasure to work with both of you, and I've benefited from just our interactions together, and you always wonder what makes people tick, and it's fun when you get to be a little closer to them and you figure out, and it's great when you get to interact with them and you go, wow, there's a lot. We're talking about, we're not looking at 5 miles wide and an inch deep, but just you get to interact and you see the depth there and the experience. And so speaking of which, I'll just jump right into, we have been working on this project right here. Art of Professional Prospecting. I don't know if people can see it, but we've got your other book up here, the 52 Strategic Words.
Yep.
And so, we got some props going on in the studio today, but
both birthed out of need. Birthed out of need that we talk about things, and they both have rich history. Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, let's start there. Okay, hold on. I need to time out because before we do, I just love this, and I'd love for other people to hear it. First, before we go to that, talk to me about the origin of the name of your business. How did you decide to call it BAABCO? BAABCO.
Right. So we are in two spaces actually, and but I'll speak to the name BAABCO. So BAABCO stands for Burt, Alicia. And then Alicia's mother was Alicia, and my mother's name was Bella.
I love that.
So Burt, Alicia, and Bella. And my mother, Bella, and my mother-in-law, Alicia, were both great personal and business mentors to us.
Very nice.
Yeah, and they really, because of their discipline and their ways of being, in that generation, right, which I think taught us both a lot about discipline, and the staying the course on certain ways of thinking, right?
Yeah.
A certain amount of the word I want to use is a conservative, being conservative in certain ways of thinking, right? Has served us well. Right. So we believe that honoring their name has served us well. And the name BAABCO has really existed since the early 2000s, since 2001, actually.
Okay.
Which was the start of our first company that still exists today.
I see. Right? Yeah. Very nice. Well, I love that. And it's such a great background story. And I think it speaks to the heart of what you do too, that, there's definitely purpose and meaning behind all of that. Purpose and meaning woven into everything that you do. So
and if you look at our logo, there's also meaning to that.
Oh, okay.
As well.
Yeah. So talk about that.
Want to talk about it?
Sure.
Okay.
So it does have meaning. So the circle would be the client that hires us.
Okay.
That's the circle, right? The arrows pointing in would be Alicia, myself, the leader that brings us in, right? The leader that wants us to develop their future leader or their present leader.
Okay.
And then the dot in the middle is the person that we're very focused on to develop.
Nice.
So that's what the logo stands for.
Well, excellent. Well, that's a good way to jump us back to where we were when I timed us out. So you talked about the need, and I know that you have something really great to say there. So talk about that. These were birthed out of need. So what were you seeing? What was going on in the marketplace that you were seeing? And I know that you had all of this background, and then you have all of this, combined background to bring to it. But what was it that sparked all of this?
Well, it starts with the forward of the book. I wrote The Art of Professional Prospecting in the first draft 30 years ago, when I was fresh into sales. At that time, I was going from technology sales, to the funding part of it, to the funding side of the business, right? But I recognized in myself the need that if I was going to be an effective competitor, right, that I needed to become steady in my production, versus the month in, month out roller coaster of production that too many salespeople see in this industry, right? So the need was there for me. I had to develop a system, a process, right, versus just a monthly goal. I mean, there's a person that's very wise that says that goals, while they're great, right, they're meant to achieve something one time, right? That we can set another goal. Processes are meant to win continuously.
Yeah.
Right. And
that.
that's what the art of professional prospecting, the 10 by 10, as we'll get further into it, is. It is a process. It is structure to win continuously. And when you look at where professional salespeople do not often win continuously, it is in the consistency, the month in, month out production, which we'll illustrate later, through the graph that we do that shows that illustrates that, right? So the need was in how can I help myself and how can I help others win continuously. It does not have to be feast or famine. It does not have to be up and down in terms of sales production, right?
Yeah. It's such a hard, because when you stay in that roller coaster ride and you stay in that feast or famine, the high highs and the low lows, there are very few people that can sustain that over a long period of time. And even if they can sustain it, they have to have families and, other people in their lives that can sustain that. And that may not even be an option for people. And then it's just the feeling of not ever being able to get traction and that inability to really feel like you're going to bed at night confident in what you're doing.
Exactly.
Right? Laying your head on the pillow at night. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. And I think that a lot of people could understand, like, something has to give here, but when they don't have the process to go with it, it can be really tough, can't it?
Yeah. And then we play the blame game, right? Well, it's this and I didn't get that, or, our pricing is too high, or the market is soft, or so on and so forth, right? And you're right. I mean, the consequences are to the tough conversations at the dinner table, right? And it really does not have to be that way. And, we've yet to talk about skill set. We've yet to talk about skill set.
Yeah.
And that's why I say in the forward of the book, look around yourself. If you look at people that get dismissed, I often ask sales leaders, look at the last 5 people you had to dismiss that you hired because they demonstrated closing skills. That was one of the reasons you hired them. Oh, they closed me, right? And then you had to dismiss them 6 months or 8 months later, or sometimes you let them stick around for a year and a half.
Yeah.
Okay. That's another story. Okay. But it wasn't because they lacked skill. They just were not producing, which speaks to that inconsistency, right? So often it does not deal with the skill set. It leads more to talented people not using good judgment on good work ethic, right? And that's what the art of professional prospecting teaches. And so it's not just this is what it is, but then we show you the how. And that is something that BAABCO, we often hear from clients. You not only tell us the what it is, but you tell us the how to fix it.
Right. Yeah.
And we talk often, and this comes from Covey, but he talks about how, it all starts with self. And people who lack the ability to commit to anything, it starts with their inability to commit to themselves. I mean, even when they are wanting to get up and go running in the morning and hit the snooze button, right? They lie to themselves and hit that snooze button 3 times, and then they don't do it. And they're not making any commitment other than to themselves. But they also are the same people that have a hard time keeping their own commitments, right? And so when they have that roller coaster and they're not getting up and doing their cold calling every single day or their prospecting every single day, it's because they're lacking their commitment to themselves. And it's probably, that's not the only reason, that's not the only place they're lacking commitment. They're lacking commitment in other places as well.
Oh, yeah.
But and they have self-doubt. And when you have self-doubt, it starts creeping in other places in your life. And it become, and then confidence goes down, and it becomes even harder to get up in the morning and go and do the cold calling. I mean, it's a never ending story.
And excuses get easier, right? Like the blaming and all of that, right?
Yeah.
Well, you often say what doesn't get fixed gets forwarded, right? And so this is why it is the 10 by 10.
Okay.
It's not 50 by Friday. It's not 25 on Wednesday and 25 on Thursday, right? It is 10 by 10, right? As you know, Dr. Cialdini says the small wins lead to the big wins, right? Paul Martinelli says, the micro agreements, eventually get into the more invasive questions, right? You got to earn your way to that, right? What is better for you? Going to the gym, once a week for 5 hours or going to the gym 5 times a week for an hour, right? So the 10 by 10 is 5 small tasks, 10 daily net new calls by 10 o'clock in the morning on anybody you haven't spoken to in 90 days. Anybody is a past customer, a present customer, or anybody that hasn't done business with your company at all. That's your total population in your territory or your franchise, right?
Right.
So it's 10 by 10 o'clock in the morning. Tom Hopkins used to say, do what you like least first, right? And yet what people tend to like least first is the one thing that earns the most of their income, right?
Yeah.
In the profession of sales, your commissions should generally represent, 75%, that's a good number, of your total earnings. So why would you not like to prospect, right?
Absolutely.
I happen to be married to a woman that she loves to prospect when she was in professional sales. Too often, we think we don't like to prospect. We think we don't like to hunt. But if you turn around your mindset of what you're doing,
right.
If you're in love with the product that you sell,
absolutely,
and you love what it does, and you appreciate the company that you work for, that you represent, you can get pretty excited about your products and services.
Yeah. And just like you did, and what we were talking about earlier, this came out of you getting connected to the need. And that 10 by 10 is really that opportunity to stay connected to who is this for? And why do they need it? And what difference will it make in them, right? Because selling in its purest form is selling to the right people with the right things, right? And it's an exchange of value, and it's going to be an exchange of value to the people who need it. Right. So,
And the 10 by 10 is not follow-up calls.
Right.
That's something else.
Okay.
Completely.
Right.
Great point. Great point. Could talk about that.
Yeah. Well, the follow-up calls is going to be something that you do later on during the day. 10 by 10 is someone you haven't talked to in 90 days. Right. So they have they're important and they have their space, but it's very different.
Yeah.
So it's about being very strategic. It's about being very intentional, being very strategic, and developing the good habits, right? The good habits that are going to bring, that are going to pay, that are going to pay off if you continue to stay strategic.
So let me ask you this question from a different angle. If I am a prospect, why does it matter to me that you've picked up the phone and called me before 10 a.m.?
Well, actually, I want you to be a suspect before you're a prospect.
Okay, so talk about that.
Well, that's up to you. That's up to you to create the suspect, right? And you have a better chance of doing that.
Right.
However, to answer your question, though, why does it matter? I would rather be the first or second person calling on you than the 10th person, right? Because 3 or 4 o'clock comes around, you've probably had 10, 15 people calling on you one way or the other, right? Okay. Calling on you earlier, you're fresher, you're maybe more enthusiastic about what your day looks like, hopefully, right?
Right.
I'm getting you, in a better mood, right? I may get some more time out of you, especially if I'm good on my vertical markets, right? And if I'm on top of my game, I'm fresher as well too, right? And I should have prepared a little bit more the evening before or days before, right? Nowadays, it's a cold call, but we've got so much intelligence available to us, right? That by the time I come into your office, if I did 2 minutes of prepping, I may know who to ask for, right? And I'd rather be the first or second person calling on you, and that's going to do you a benefit. And that I'm not going to be there to waste your time, right? I know my value. I want to get to know you, and I'm going to ask you relevant questions and really lower the threshold of really just getting to know you a little bit and earn the right to be a contender for your business, not for today, but for the future. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. Right.
And I'd rather you be a suspect versus a prospect because when you are a prospect, then you know that there's a need. You know what you need. You know you're in the process of needing some sort of a system, right?
Okay.
Whatever it is that I'm selling. But if you're a suspect, for me, that means that you don't realize that you need something yet, which means that you have not been in. You're not shopping yet. But I'm now creating an interest that you did not realize that there was a need. I am creating that need for you.
Yeah. Nice.
So so now you're my suspect. Now I am now creating that need you had no idea that you needed. Now I'm beginning to, I am now your trusted advisor. I'm now creating this certain need that you're now beginning to see. And you're like, okay, I had no idea.
And it's not because you're creating the need. You're just making me aware of the needs.
I'm uncovering those pain points that just from the conversation that you and I are having, I'm beginning to uncover some pain points that you're just telling me about, some pain points that you had no idea were pain points.
Or opportunities.
Or opportunities.
Right. Nice.
Let me just say this about that. Nowadays, more than ever, we call ourselves consultants in the profession of sales, and rightfully so.
Oh, absolutely.
We call ourselves, and rightfully so. And the mark of a great consultant is somebody that can bring to you a need or an opportunity or a pain that you did not know you had until you met me. Right. And I can tell you that when I was in technology sales, I often used to say that my job was to introduce myself and advise you on the many problems you did not know you had until you met me. Right. Yeah. That was just one way of phrasing it. Right. So the suspect, when you are then able to develop that interest, develop that need, potentially create it into an urgency to the point where you consider it now important. Now it is a priority to you. Right. If you do decide to shop, and probably half of those suspects will decide to shop and become a prospect, right? I'm able then to build loyalty with you because I'm the one who brought this to your attention.
Yeah.
If I came upon you and you were a prospect and already looking at 3 or 4 of me, okay, it's going to be very hard for me to really build loyalty, and you're probably very close to getting to a price war with your competition. Right. Because it's a commodity industry maybe that you're in, right? Whether it's technology or something else.
Sure.
But if you came in and built that need and desire and urgency to the point now where you think it's important enough to look around, there is dialogue, and we can do this at a later time in this podcast where I can have dialogue with you about justifying to you why, if you're going to shop, I still deserve the first opportunity since I'm the one who brought this to your attention.
Oh, yeah.
You can't do that with the prospect. You can't have that dialogue.
Right, because the opportunity is past, right?
Well, because I'm not the one who created it. But if I created it and got everybody in your office excited about it and it's justified because I created you as a suspect, that we can do. And it's a very, very powerful dialogue, very, very ethical dialogue where I can ask you for your loyalty since I'm the one who created it for you.
Yeah, that's
sense. The value of a suspect. And that's why you want to double or triple your net new prospecting, because you can't get that if you're talking to prospects all day long. We'll talk more about that.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, let's just use that as an opportunity to. So what you've done? I'm going to ask you a question here about this because you started this a long time ago. And then it became something that was formatted and available and into this form as a book. How many years ago? When was this first released?
Oh, it was first released in 2012.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's been a while now that you've had this out and this has been in use. I'm going to ask you just a simple question because I just want to. I'm asking this for a certain people that might be listening to this, because here's what I know. I know a lot of people that have books in them. They have frameworks in them. They have systems inside of them. They've just never taken the time to put it into a form that's useful for other people. Napoleon Hill said, power comes from specialized knowledge, highly organized and intelligently directed towards a very specific goal. So you went through that process together and you brought your collective abilities and knowledge to that process. So all that to just ask this simple question. As you were putting this together, what surprised you the most in terms of what showed up in the book and what you might not have expected when you first started the project of this book to what ended up in the book? What surprised you the most to what made it in there that you weren't expecting on the front end?
If I understand the question correctly, what surprised me the most is that I have yet to see a book that addresses the art of professional prospecting the way that we do. And that is that this is about overcoming the excuses, the fear, the procrastination, the busyness, right? It is not a thick book. The first version was 50 pages. The new refreshed version, which we did it in the style of the 52 strategic words, the reason why it's 100 pages now is because of the graphics, right? Which really make it nice, really, really nice. Yeah. Thanks to Alicia working with our graphic artists. But the reading content is still less than 60 pages, right? Why? Because prospecting is not complicated. There's just no wiggle room.
Right.
So what still amazes me is that there is still not a book out there like this that speaks to the real reason why people don't prospect.
Right.
Fear, procrastination, busyness, they make up excuses, right? And there's still nothing like it. There are 22 mental workout questions in this book, 22, right? 14 of those questions have the word today or right now. That's my style, right?
Yeah, right.
Do it now, right? So that's what came out of it for me, that decades later, when I first did the draft,
right,
it's still the same message, and it's still the same reason that when you talk to leaders or owners that drive momentum and responsibility and accountability for sales teams, it's the same problem.
Yes. Yeah.
Along with onboarding, which is another problem, but that's another time. Why do some of the biggest sales-driven organizations in the world have huge turnover issues? It's not because they don't know the product. It's not because their people weren't licensed to sell this, or that. It's because they weren't producing. And they just went, and that person left and just went to a competitor with their same licenses. Yeah. Or their same certifications, right? Or their same knowledge and technology to sell it somewhere else.
Yes.
It's the poor judgment of somebody that has the talent, but doesn't use good judgment in how to operate their territory as their business, as their franchise. Yeah. And that's why they don't have the consistent success. So that's what stands out to me.
I think the reason is it's fear.
Yeah.
It's the rejection.
Yeah.
The fact that they have to go do 10 cold calls and they get that door slammed in their face, right? And so it's that fear. And they have to have a very strong tolerance for that. And so it's a mental game. And so that to me is what stood out, especially when I've been working and creating the masterminds around that, is that I think that, when we talk to the salespeople we were working with, is helping them understand that it's not motivation, it's commitment. And I keep telling them commitment comes first. And so I'm a gardener. So the way that I explain it is that in the heat of the summer of Texas, it's not, I don't get motivated to be out there in the heat of the summer to either go running or go be in the garden. What I have to do is I have to commit myself to doing it every day at the same time. And once I'm out there, I get excited and motivation comes in. So it is commitment first, motivation follows.
Very nice.
Right? So we have to first be committed to doing it. The motivation follows. And the way that I've been explaining it lately is once we are committed and motivation follows, and then we do it consistently, we are disciplined to do it consistently, we develop the habit. And that's what the 10 by 10 is. How do we develop it into a habit to where it feels unnatural to not doing it?
Very good.
Unnatural. Right? I love that.
Or it feels unnatural. So the other way that I explain it is brushing our teeth every day. It's a habit. Our parents disciplined us to do it, right? And so there had to be a commitment to doing that. It feels unnatural to leave the house without brushing our teeth, right? We want this to feel that unnatural.
Very nice. Well said. Very well said.
But it's not a habit yet.
Well, so now, so you have this, and I first encountered it when we were actually working together on a reframing of a sales process, and
in Palm Beach.
And so, and I encountered this and was instantly impressed by it, and all the work in it, and then these couple of years later we get to work together. So we've been taking this book and specifically translating it into an online platform where people can encounter this. You've been in the room with people with the book and individually in mastermind groups, and you also have an app that people can connect with your wisdom and all that. But you've spent a lot of energy, time, attention, a great investment working with people with this book. You are helping them get results. You're in the room with them. Now what we've done is we've put it in an online platform and made that available. So if I'm a person who understands now how critical prospecting is to me, what will I encounter when I go to this program?
So we decided to bring this to the digital, as a digital mastermind, because we want to make sure that it's available to others that maybe, an organization doesn't hire us to do a mastermind like we're doing currently, but someone who wants to do a self-pace can come in and still have accessibility of the book, but also accessibility to the content with Burt and I, right? They still get to see us talking about it, and us really exploring some of these topics in the same depth that we would with an organization.
Nice.
So if it's just an individual that wants to really explore a lot of these conversations, they're able to do that through the digital course,
right?
But they're able to take it at their own pace and be able to just go chapter by chapter and really look at some of these exploratory questions that we have, and they're able to reflect on those questions and maybe consider what are the things that are holding themselves back, and be able to have those conversations with themselves, but then also really reflect on what do we think about some of those questions as well. And so it becomes just I think a psychological mental process of what we experience as people out in sales, and what holds us back when we are going through this process. And so this just becomes what I love about it is that it is self-paced. And if anybody's taking taking a course online, it's going to be very similar to that. They can just take their time through it, step back and reflect, and really look at some of those key questions and really be true to themselves, and really be honest with themselves, and really consider if some of those key areas are things that they maybe had not considered as probably areas that are holding them back.
Sure.
Because they might be really good in sales, but have not maybe considered, is this potentially a barrier for me? And then how do I overcome that barrier, and how do I continue to push myself forward and not let it become a challenge?
Yeah, I think that's great. Earlier you said commitment leads to motivation, and that eventually leads to the habit. And I could see how people who get that and they're living that, like they understand their need to deepen their own commitment, they understand what's at stake for them, that they can take this book and have the program as another layer on top of that with it, more interaction and a greater opportunity to take that personal. You know, they can make a commitment deeper to themselves with this program, going in and interacting and letting that translate into all of the things that make your work when you're working with people with this book valuable, right?
Yeah. And I wanted to add to that, we spoke earlier about the need, right? And I sometimes will say during trainings that we're not bilocatable as humans. We're not bilocatable, right?
Yeah.
As a sales leader, you can't be out on every call, right? But thank goodness to modern technology, right? We have digital platforms now, right? And so this also allows us to go back to that word that we started using earlier about the need. This enables us to help more people, right? People, we're from Texas, right? At one point, when I was in the financial end of our industry, I was over 5 states, right? But mostly I was in Texas, right? So we want to help more people throughout our great United States, right? So we think that by doing it this way, we'll be able to help more salespeople out there, whether they're new to the profession, right? Whether they're in the middle of their career and they're wondering, is this really where I want to be? Or maybe they're, they've been it for a few decades and, and they're wondering, did I make the right move? I've got another 10 years or 15 years that I want to do this. How do I really cross the finish line at 200 miles an hour? Yeah, and I think this is a well planned playbook to do exactly that, and the way that we will reach them will be through this avenue, right? Does that make sense? Right?
Yeah, and they don't have to, right now, the way we're currently working with organizations, it's the organization would have to hire us in order for us to be able to work with that individual, right? And so we're only working with teams, and so that might put that individual salesperson out of that price range of being able to have accessibility to the content, but by being able to do this, it doesn't. And now they have more control in their ability to grow themselves without having to wait for an organization to be able to hire us. And it would be for the whole organization versus it's going to be more cost effective for an individual.
Yeah. And I think that along with the individual, it could be available as well for teams, that if people aren't, even someone who has a team may not be you may not be readily available to them or them to you, but this will be that nice way to connect. And they could also bring teams to this as well.
And let me say this too. This is going to speak again to my mindset versus the doctor's, right? If you are a salesperson in a geographical territory and you have 6 individual competitors, as an example, no matter what space you're in, right? You have among those 6 individuals earning different income levels, selling the same commodity. Cars, technology, services, whatever. You got to ask yourself, why is that? Same commodity product. One earning 50,000, one earning 80, one earning 150, one earning 250. What's that all about? Right? And it may not be skill set. It could come down to work ethic, right? So this person or this team that right now we can't reach, right? The way we're doing it now on this new platform enables us to help that person that may be at $80,000 a year, help them to develop the right habits. While we help with skill set, yes, but the real foundation is the habits, the work habits, to build that consistency in prospecting, that structure. That's what we're working for.
Outstanding,
right?
Well, and I could see
and that integrity of being honest with having those right habits.
And I could see where someone may be representing an excellent company, but that company just might not be at the place where they're providing this to them. And this is something that, when you're serious about getting your results, then you've got an opportunity to have an edge, right? Through this process. Yeah.
And you need an edge.
Yeah.
You need an edge. Yeah.
Well, let's talk then about just you've given plenty along the way, but give me. I want each of you to give me one key insight on the art of professional prospecting, something that we haven't already discussed. What is one thing that someone's going to find in this that we haven't already talked about?
Well, they're going to find themselves first.
Okay.
And we often talk about that, whether it's in leadership development or it's in sales training. When you go through the art of professional prospecting, which, as you know, we're going to talk about the importance of having the book first, reading it in its entirety, which is a 2-hour read.
Right.
Okay. We want you to read it because there's so many key steps and formulas for success that are simple to understand, right? So we encourage them to ask them, where did you find yourself in this read? Where did you find yourself in these motivational tips, right? So if I'm understanding your question correctly, just that, that they're going to find themselves multiple times in the book and say, that's me right there.
Oh, very good.
That's where I can start right there. It's a simple shift, as you spoke to earlier, right? It's a mindset, right? I'm going to try it. And I on a scale of 1 to 10, I may hit a 6 the first time I try it, right? And then tomorrow I'll be a 6.5, and then maybe in 2 weeks I'll be at a 7.5, right? But you have to be true to yourself, right? And stay committed, right? And when you see that improvement, you'll start getting motivated, right? And that shift could be in something as easy as the prize of the newfound 5, right? And I'll leave the audience in suspense right now, right? Okay. Yeah. Or it could be in the 20-30 rule. Gosh, I never thought about the 20-30 rule. What's that all about? Gosh, if I do the math on that, my gosh, if I was doing that, I could take my $80,000 a year and I'd be making $150,000 a year, right? Just from the 20-30 rule. So find yourself somewhere there. What do you think?
Yeah, I think for me, I think the biggest learning that will come from the book is the organization that they will have to reflect on. I think that part of what we do every day, and that's for anyone, even if you're not in sales, but we waste a lot of time. We waste a lot of time doing things that we shouldn't be doing. Like if you think about 8 to 5, there's so much time that is wasted on things that bring us no value. And so part of that is them understanding, what am I doing? Because being busy doesn't mean you're being productive.
Very good. Yeah, well said. Yeah. Outstanding.
That I think is going to be, that's a big part of it.
And that's one of the things that we do when we actually do. It's interesting because the 10 by 10, when I started doing training in the 10 by 10, it was a lunch and learn for an hour and a half. And then after the financial crisis in 2009, 2010, it became like a 3-hour training. And then over time, it evolved to an all-day training. That's how important it became, right? And so one of the things that we do when we do the all-day training is we go through an exercise of asking salespeople, so what are you doing between 8:30 and 10? And we list 20 check marks, and we go across the room. And we rotate. We call on everybody that's in the room. So what are you doing between 8:30 and 10? And there's no wrong answers. I'm in the bathroom. I'm eating breakfast. I'm outside smoking a cigarette. There's no wrong answers, right? I'm on Google. I'm on Facebook. I'm working on proposals. I'm answering emails. I'm doing follow-up calls, which that you mentioned that's a huge thing. We know follow-up calls are critical. I'm not gonna stop doing that, right? I'm delivering this. I'm doing that. I'm in a meeting. I'm so on and so forth. Doing installs. Or so on and so forth, right? There's all sorts of things, right? But to your point, right, we have to see what we're doing during the day that is robbing us. I mean, if you're making $100,000 a year, that's $50 an hour. It's in the book, right? The value of your time, right? So you have to see what you're doing during the day that is taking you out of that $50 an hour arena. $100 an hour, that's $200,000 a year, right? You can do the math. It's very easy, right? So to Alicia's point, we waste a lot of time. Now, we also do a lot of things that are important that have to be done. Your CRM, whatever product you're using, right?
Right.
It's hard to get somebody else to do that for you because unless they were there with you.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, you're the only one that can do your CRM, right? But you shouldn't be doing it during prime time. Okay. So yes, not only do we waste time, but we do things during prime time that need to be done at other parts of the day, right? I don't know anybody that works Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 only and makes six figures. Maybe you can name one person, right? But if you want to make that kind of money in the profession of sales, and you shouldn't be in the profession of sales if you don't want to make more than $100,000, but that's another conversation, okay? You have to be willing to look at this as a business owner, right? And we know that very few business owners work, less than Monday to Friday, 8 to 5, right? So that's that. So that's the key, right? Do things that are not a waste of time and look at what you're doing, but also do the things that are important, but not during prime time.
Very good. Very good. All right. So last thoughts. Last thoughts for someone who's out there and, they've basically made this decision. They're all in the role of sales, whatever that may be. What are just some last thoughts that each of you could give and, give them, I give them a good encouragement. Let them know. We've talked a lot about what they're going to get in here, but maybe they just need one more thought from you about why to jump in and what they can expect and what's available to them. What's just one last parting shot we could give people here?
Do not get discouraged. I think that part of I always have a positive mindset. And for me, I'm one of those that I have a very high thought process about myself. And so anytime, especially when I was in sales, I would go in there and I would, no matter what they said to me, I was not going to let that bother me because I knew that I could bring in value. And if I know that I'm in there, if I'm cold calling and I know that I'm there because I genuinely can bring them value and they don't see the value yet, right? I am not going to let that affect my own self-worth. And so part of that is, it is a mind game. So I want people to understand the value they bring to people. And if they know that, then they should not feel devalued when they get that door slammed on their face, right? So part of that is they have to understand the value they bring in whatever it is that they sell. When they know that they can bring people value, then there's nothing that can make them feel devalued. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. It does.
But I think it's part of the work that they have to do first to understand what are they selling and what value do they bring to their clients.
Yeah. And I think when you're saying that, one thing that occurs to me is that it is very easy for us to take all of this processes and the necessary things that must happen in order for a sale to take place. It's very easy for us to take that so personally. And when you get the homework you're doing is to understand what's really happening here.
Yeah.
And you said the key word in the whole thing. The real thing that's happening here is an exchange of value, and you are offering the people the opportunity for that. And that is not about your self-worth.
No.
Right? That is about someone else's journey and where you get to be a part of taking them on, right? No matter what your product or service is. So yeah, I love that. And I think if people can get that, there's a lot of empowerment in that.
Oh, yes.
People can step, because I like to think of, as a coach, we always talk about the idea of, learn to be a non-judgmental observer of your life, right? And I think definitely in sales, you have an opportunity to do that.
Right.
Yeah, very good.
But I think it's part of understanding what it is that they're doing in the whole, what value. So they have to understand the product that they're selling, right? Or the services that they're selling. And how that can be life-changing to people.
Yes, absolutely.
And and what value that brings to others. When they understand that and they detach it from them, that becomes part of that process. But I think that sometimes it becomes about the sale.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's when it becomes more about me.
Yeah.
And it's no longer about bringing value.
Yeah.
And that becomes the big difference.
Sure.
And it's not helping others. It's about, I'm not making my commission. And that's when things go really wrong.
Yeah. Great. All right. Well, we're leaving it to you.
So to me, it's three parts. Number one, if you are not passionate about the company that hires you, okay, and the products and the products they sell, that's your first order of business. Because if you dread coming to work, then you need to find someplace else. So be in love with the products that you sell and the company that employs you, number one, okay? Number two, when you are in front of a prospect or a suspect or a client, you have got to understand what their strategy is, okay? What their strategy is for their business. And then when you can do that, you must align your value proposition to that strategy. And if you can successfully do that, then you are ahead of your competition, right? Okay. And then the third thing is that if you are not succeeding, and we'll talk about this, you got to ask yourself, and this is a lesson from my dad, okay?
Yeah.
Were you outsold or were you out-prospected? And that's what this book is all about. Were you outsold or were you out-prospected? And I'll bet you, and I'm not a betting man, I'm going to tell you where you're going to land.
Yeah, outstanding. Well, listen, talk about value. You both bring a tremendous amount of value. It is an incredible privilege for me to be in the studio with the two of you. Looking forward to the rest of our time this week here. And thank you so much for being a part of it, man. Being a part of the Refinery
We're
Podcast.
excited. Thank you. Thanks for having us. Thank you.
For now.